All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Travis Narvell, Strategy and Engagement here at Atlanta Public Schools, and thank you for joining us this afternoon for what is our third community conversation on board goals and guardrails. I see a few people jumping on, and so I'll kind of talk a little bit so that people will be able to hear some data information from Dr. O'Brien, as well as any information on strategies related to literacy from our academics team, and then um, one new thing is kind of talking about a literacy policy that the board is working on. And so I want to get some feedback from internal and external stakeholders, so employees as well as community members. Feel free to share some feedback on that. And so let's go through the purpose. For those of you who are new to these conversations, this is a way for us to build awareness of the board's goals and guardrails. Um, those are kind of the student focused ones are the goals. The guardrails are a little bit more adult focused, and it helps provide accountability as well as progress monitoring throughout the year for the Board of Education and for the administration. And so these conversations are an opportunity to dive a little deeper on it than what happens at the board level, as well as provide some clarity and most importantly, hear from you all any ideas that you have as well that could strengthen what is already taking place. And so that's kind of the point of these meetings. And then as always, we are always open to continuous improvement. So as we do these, if you've got some ideas on how we can make it better, stronger, more effective, please always let us know. And so as a reminder, these are our goals and our guardrails. You can see the student focused goals at the top. Today, we are focused on goal 1, literacy proficiency. And then the bottom are the guardrails, basically kind of the box that we should keep in mind as we implement those goals. For those who joined us in August, we talked about guardrails 2 and 3, stakeholder engagement and culture and climate. If you joined us in September, you heard about equity. And now we're in October and we're talking about literacy. Next month is November, where we talk about numeracy. And at the end of today, I'll kind of show the board approved a progress monitoring calendar this past Monday. And so I'll highlight what that will look like for the remainder of the year as well. Before I pass it to Dr. O'Brien, I also put into the chat both a link to a bunch of information on APS Connect. So that's where you can get access to the district calendar, recaps, these recordings and presentations. But then if you want the presentation directly, I also put that in there as well. As always, if you have questions, feel free. We have kind of a smaller group, so we'll probably be able to do just raising your hand and you can jump off mute and ask questions. Or if you don't feel comfortable, put it in the chat and I'll try to pull it out and either ask it to Dr. O'Brien or someone else on the call that may be able to help us answer it. And so with that, I will pass it to Dr. O'Brien. Do you mind walking us through the data that was shared on Monday night?
Perfect. Thank you, Travis. So good afternoon, everyone. So on Monday night, the focus of the conversation was around goal 1, which is literacy. And so our goal 1 looks at the percentage of students in grades 3 through 8 scoring proficient or above in reading as measured by the Georgia Milestones will increase from 31.2% in August 2022 to Y% in August 2026. Some of you may remember that back in the spring, the board had voted yes to reset our baseline from the 2019 school year to 2022. At the moment, we have not established what the annual targets will be for goal 1. As a result, that's why you see the end target as Y%. Well, as you can see in the actual chart itself, we do illustrate what the original targets were in the blue line. And as you can see, the purple line shows that pre-baseline, so our 2020-19 result at 36.9% to our baseline of at school year 2022, which was 31.2%. Our most recent Georgia Milestones data shows that 33.3% of our students in grades 3 through 8 did score at the proficient or above level on the Georgia Milestones assessment. Currently, our status of goal 1 is below target. And that's because, again, at this moment, 33.3% of students are at the proficient level. While that is an increase of 2% from last year, we have not established what the actual annual target will be. And based on the original annual target of 41.0%, we are well below that amount. And so we are seeing that as a district, we are below the original target of 41%. Next slide. So as a reminder, we do have two interim goals for goal one around literacy proficiency. And so this is our ability to be able to progress monitor throughout the school year how well our students are doing towards reaching our annual goals. And so interim goal 1.1 looks at the percentage of students in grades kindergarten through first grade experiencing difficulty in reading on the district universal screening assessment will decrease from 49.7% in May 2022 to 43.7% in May 2024. As you can see from the chart, the blue line illustrates our target. So again, we started at 49.7% of our students experiencing difficulty in reading at the spring of the 2022 school year. You can see where we were last spring with 45.7% of our students experiencing difficulty in reading. And our most recent MAP reading fluency data shows that 23.3% of our students in kindergarten and first grade are experiencing difficulty in reading. I do want to note that the NWEA, who is the vendor that does the MAP assessment, did change their way that they calculate the threshold for students experiencing difficulty in reading. Prior to this fall, NWEA used the 20th percentile as the cutoff. So students that were below the 20th percentile were flagged as being students that may be experiencing difficulty in reading based on the assessment. NWA's researchers went back and looked at that data that they've been doing, and they decided to adjust the threshold to now look at the 10th percentile. And so the idea behind that is that by focusing on students that are at the 10th percentile or lower, we're identifying the students that have the highest need to be able to support with interventions. As a result, due to the change in the calculation, it really makes it difficult for us to really compare our fall MAP reading fluency results to previous administrations of the MAP. So it makes it hard for us to compare this fall to how we did spring of last year or spring of the previous year. We are currently in talks with NWEA to see if there is a possibility of our fall data being recalculated the way that it was previously for us to be able to really see those comparisons. We are still waiting to hear back from them to see if that is a possibility. And so as a result, we have listed our status on interim goal 1.1 to be determined because we don't feel comfortable saying that we are above target, on target, or even below target with the numbers really not being comparable at the moment. Next slide. And so our second interim goal 1.2, looks at the percentage of students in grades 2 through 8 with a projected Georgia Milestones achievement level of proficient or above in ELA on the District Universal Screening Assessment will increase from 33.9% in May 2022 to 39.9% in May 2024. So again, we have established ourselves at having an annual target of 3% that we would like to meet for each of the school years. As you can see from the chart here, the blue line identifies our target. So again, we started in May of 2022 with 33.9% of our students being at the proficient or above level. You can see at the spring of last year where it says 2022-2023, we had 35.5% of our students that were at the proficient level. Our most recent MAP data shows that for this fall, students in grades 2 through 8, that 35.1% of our students are at the proficient or above level. So again, we're with the exception of like 0.04 or zero point 0.4 percentage points, we're pretty close this fall to where we were at the end of the spring, but we are below our target of 39.9%. That's where we're hoping to be at the end of the spring. And so as a result, we have identified our status based on our most recent MAP data as being below target, since we are 4.8 percentage points away from our end target this May. Next slide.
Awesome. I think those are the data slides, Monique. So maybe we can pause here for if there's any questions. Feel free to raise your hand on the data itself for Dr. O'Brien before we talk about some of the strategies or some of the work being done. And you can also put it in the chat if you're comfortable. And while people are thinking of questions, I have some questions that come up pretty regularly for me as well as others. And then I'll ask one and then I'll go over to Lisa Olmsted. Monique, could you talk a little bit about what is included in ELA proficiency versus our kids can read? What's the difference? What are they both measuring? Just to kind of explain what all is included in an ELA proficiency data point.
Yes, absolutely. And so on the Georgia Milestones, when we think about ELA, there are actually multiple components of English language arts that are measured. So part of that is whether or not the students are reading at grade level on their whatever the grade level text is. But there's also the writing component, as well as a couple of other domains that are measured. And so it's not a direct one-to-one relationship of whether or not this is measuring students' ability to read. We do get a Lexile score from the Georgia Department of Education based on the Georgia Milestones Assessment, which does allow us to be able to see the percentage of our students that are reading at or above grade level. But again, this particular data point encompasses a variety of other ELA components and not just reading by itself.
Gotcha. Hence the interim guardrails or goals. Sorry, kind of diving a little deeper into it.
Correct.
Awesome. Before I jump to Mr. Johnson's question in the chat, go to Ms. Olmsted. Lisa, feel free to jump off mute.
Hi. Mine might be similar to the question in the chat. I'm not sure there's an answer to what I'm going to ask. So it might just be more of a comment. But every time we talk about the goals and guardrails and we see, the goals and I understand the changing of the baseline, this was something that, I think people have expressed in the past is it feels like despite these discussions having gone on for years, and I think it's a great endeavor, but it does feel like we haven't gotten to a point yet where we have a baseline, a goal. Like I feel like my kid who started in elementary school is going to be in high school before we even get to something that we feel, at least looking at this, is stable. And so I think it kind of relates to the question in the chat. I had this question before it was mentioned that the testing organization changed the calculation. I think 10% is quite low. And it makes me think, what about the kid 20%? And I'm glad to hear that APS is like, well, can we recalculate it to 20%? But is there something more stable that can be added to these measures to catch kids? I feel like a whole, generation is going to be graduated and on before we really know what is being measured and what it looks like. And it also just feels there's constant changes that are making it difficult for these measures to tell us anything or to be actionable, at least from what it looks like from a parent standpoint. And this is, if this sounds critical, I'm obviously voicing a criticism, but it's because I really believe in what y'all are trying to do, and I want people to support it, but I just feel some of this is losing itself in translation when it gets to us.
Monique, may I?
Absolutely.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Jermel Riggins. I am the Elementary Director of Curriculum and Instruction. And Ms. Olmsted, I also agree that sometimes the fluctuation makes it hard for us to do true comparatives. One thing that you could do that has been a constant is look at the subunit scores that give you a very good indicator of where kids are doing with each piece of the measure. For example, phonological awareness has its own measure. Language comprehension has its own measure. So you can look at those scores. Those scores would be constant. I think for what we've been looking at for a goal measure, if you will, in 1.1 is whether or not kids have expressed difficulty with reading, and that was indicated by a flag. Well, the flag is comprised of like multiple things. And so the threshold for 20 has changed because norms changed, if you will, in more than one way after the pandemic. But the norms changed after the pandemic. But the one true or the constants are the individual sub scores themselves. And I guess, Monique, could we report out, even though I know they're not part of like 1.1 and it's not the same measure as what a flag would indicate with regard to reading or expressing difficulties reading, but is there a way that parents can see like their scores for phonological and phonemic awareness, decoding skills, language comprehension? Can they see those things separately?
They should be able to on the parent report. I don't have the document in front of me, but I believe so. And one other thing that I would add as well, one of the things that you may notice about all of our interim goals that they actually end in May of 2024. And that is by design under the Student Outcomes Focused Governance Framework, where while your overarching goal may last 5, in our case, about 6 years out to 2026, they do recommend our interim goals to only be anywhere from 1 to 3 years. And part of that is that one, we shouldn't be doing stagnant, doing the same thing for 5 to 6 years. Our strategy should adjust slightly as, our students are doing differently, and, as we learn more. The other part that I will say as well is that, again, in full transparency, during the 21-22 school year, MAP was new to us as a district. And so using the universal screening flag was at that time what we felt was the best attempt to try to measure students' difficulty in reading. As Ms. Riggins has kind of stated, there are some other areas of MAP that are a little bit more consistent that we can use. And so one of the things that we will be working on later this spring and early into the summer is reevaluating our interim goals so that we can, and there are possibilities now that we know a little bit more about MAP to look at when we look at our interim goal 1.1 from 2024 to take us through 2026, to look to see and explore what other measures are out there that will better get at our students or measures our students' difficulty in reading.
Thank you both. And I think just to kind of reiterate Lisa's point, is while parents may be able to look at that at the parent report, how can that be lifted at the district level? So I would imagine even if the interim goal changes, but it's not to that unit level that Jermel mentioned, then in each one of our reports to the board, there is an addendum of other breakdowns by cluster, by subgroup, that there's an opportunity in that to share by unit or whatever the kind of sub level is to help paint a picture. But this is exactly the conversation we want to have because we want the goals in Guardrails to be meaningful, but also understandable by everybody. So that's kind of why we're having these conversations. Any other questions? Let's see. Kind of a couple, sometimes we have confusion on this one just with the targets going down versus going up. So this is kind of one where we want students experiencing difficulty reading to go down versus most of the other goals in Guardrails are looking for an upward trajectory. And then to get to Mr. Johnson's question specifically, I thought we were kind of talking around it about strengthening them, but specifically, should the district be looking at goals that are not reliant on external entities? Should we not be beholden to shifts in other organizations when managing our own goals and guardrails? So I don't know if there's feedback or anything on that.
Yeah, I would say that that is, a very good point, Mr. Johnson. And so again, as we are this spring and this summer, re-looking at our interim goals that are going to take us from school year 2024 to 2026, that definitely is something that we can explore to see what measures would possibly align with goal one. Part of the piece with the student outcome focused governance is that we really want it to be, whatever the measure is, something that displays what students know and are able to do. So under that context, definitely there are opportunities for us to be able to, take a moment, learn from this. Again, this is our first time kind of rolling this out, learn from what worked well, and what are some areas that we can improve on. So I definitely appreciate your feedback.
Awesome. Thank you. If something else pops up, feel free to throw it in the chat or raise your hand. And so with that, I may ask our Director of Elementary Curriculum and Instruction to highlight a few of the strategies that we've been implementing over the past few years related to literacy, and maybe any highlights that you've seen, bright spots, anything you want to share on strategies. And then my ask for the group will be, if there's not just questions, but if there's feedback, ideas, thoughts, kind of throw them in the chat as well. All right, Mr. Riggins.
Okay, so I think I'm frozen on the screen, but I'm going to go ahead and start talking. I'm currently at Long Middle in the Media Center, so please, everybody's probably pulling here, but I will say that our academic recovery plan was meant to support students with what, I consider to be unfinished learning. Where and it's most expressed, I would say, in the primary grades, in kindergarten, in literacy. A lot of those skills come later in the school year, as many of you who may have a kindergartner or have had a kindergartner to know that a lot of those skills are just more acquired during the later parts of the year as they mature as kinders. So a lot of that unfinished learning was missed in that space where we were out for the pandemic. So the original plan was around recovering with an intervention block for all students, if you will, for 30 minutes a day. And in that time, we were working with students in areas where learning, again, was unfinished or simply not present. So in that block, we did a lot of assessment and then instructional planning and delivery of those plannings in and around what students' gaps were being noticed and presented through the assessments. We also used the universal screener to determine who would be mostly supported in this program. We do have kids who flourished. I want to be clear. Some kids absolutely did fine during the pandemic, but we really wanted to make sure that we were pinpointing those students who still needed support in that intervention block. And also we used those supports and those assessments to determine who would go to summer school as well. So one of the things that has been lifted in this work as we have returned from the pandemic, if you will, is the importance of quality instruction in small groups. So a lot of the work that we are doing now and in the future will be dependent on more scores that are geared towards, you'll hear the word targeted a lot, targeted instruction for students' needs and meeting their needs. And again, students with targeted needs come at both ends of the spectrum. So there might be some students who are still struggling, but we also want to address the needs of the students who have excelled during this time. So we're using those assessments and that data both in the classroom and outside of the classroom. And I just kind of want to piggyback, if I may, on what Mr. Johnson said before about other assessments and results. That is the entire point of classroom assessments, formative and summative, and we need those things to provide a well-rounded picture of students so that we're actually addressing their needs in the best way possible. We've also had a new look, if you will, at level setting around Tier 1 instruction. All of our teachers last January engaged in professional learning centered on Tier 1 instruction, making sure that we normed around that, not only what's expected of students, but success criteria as well. I'm kind of just going through some of the bolded things here, but Travis, please let me know if I miss anything. Also, the implementation of curriculum materials. The first thing that we did in the district that was a mandate, if you will, was the middle school with Amplify for ELA and Amplify for mathematics. We've also done district-wide implementation of foundations. We rolled that out 2 years ago. Some of our schools were using it and some were not. So we've normed and created some standards around that. All of our schools have systematic and explicit phonics instruction daily. This past year, we picked up writing because, again, there are 3 components to literacy. You need phonics, you need reading comprehension, and you need writing. So we rolled out supports around writing this year, and a lot of the growth that we experienced on the Georgia milestones is directly related to the work that we have done, not only in early literacy, but writing as well. And so all of those curricular resources that are quote unquote district mandates, those are the things that we're lifting and supporting. And even those things where there has been lots of evidence, excuse me, I'm plugging up here, but even where there's been lots of evidence to support a resource, our team down at the district office also supports those things as well. And if you've heard of the APS-5, I'll quickly talk about how the APS-5 keeps us grounded in that work, because again, we're using the data to drive our curriculum and instruction supports. A lot of what we do is making sure that we address the whole child, not only through curriculum, but you'll see our SEL supports pushing towards that. Many of our walkthroughs talk about how ready and eager our students are to learn, so that a lot of those things, people, when they're talking about problems in the classroom, we don't experience those as much because the SEL has worked. So that would be the APS-5. And I want to say, kind of circle back, if you will, with signature programming and some of those unique approaches to learning that we've included in our schools. I think I hit all 5, but there are some questions in the chat, but I don't mind at all answering. I just need to check the chat right quick.
No worries, I'll help you. I'll help you. While we pause for people to put in questions, Jamel is in the library along, and we also had library services present on Monday as a board to talk about updates happening in libraries around the district, increasing and increases in books being checked out.
That's right.
Media specialist in every school. So wanted to that was one of the topics for Monday night as well. So a couple questions. One is about the measures. What are I think it's 2 different ones. What are the measures and thresholds being used for intervention, and then also measures or thresholds being used for targeted instruction?
Okay. So the measures for intervention, they are based on the norm. So I'm going to go back to Monique's conversation before about 20%. All of those things are based upon norms for the time of the year. So there are norms for the fall, what's expected for kids in the fall, what's expected for kids in their capabilities in the spring. So we use norms set forth by NWEA around what normally happens for each kid at each grade level. And we use those norms to determine who receives intervention support. Targeted support works much in the sense of, if we're looking at a grade report, a kid could be operating at grade level, average, right? Like once you average all of those like sub units together, all of those things that you measure, after you average those together, there may be one that's lower than others. So I would know that that area needs specific targeted instruction. So once you are, somebody mentioned it before about the parent report, the parent report will report out numerous things, especially around the domains for each one of the areas. There's domains in math, domains in ELA, and we use those domains. Again, you could be operating at or above grade level just fine, but you could have a weakness that's displayed in the data. And those are the things that we use for targeted instruction, be that above grade level or below grade level. We use the information for that.
Awesome. Deanne, I don't know if you want to jump off mute to either ask the question that came in the chat, or if you have a separate question that you'd like to ask.
It's a separate question. I guess in terms of those thresholds that you just talked about, and I know you explained it on Monday night, but it seems like they just changed a threshold for K1, as I was understanding the presentation Monday night. So I guess to finish up on that question, how much are we just taking what NWA is the threshold versus actually looking at our students across the city of Atlanta and giving teachers and or schools the ability to maybe pulling kids that don't meet said criteria that they see? How hard is that they have to meet this level?
So we do, we say it all the time about triangulating data, right? So there will be kids who on any given day, you don't ever want to have one singular test that determines anything, right? So teachers have the ability to assess and to triangulate data and make decisions that are best for students when it comes to that instruction. A lot of times as a classroom teacher, I had kids who simply did not, computer assessments just were not their thing. And so you have to have multiple data points in order to justify the changes that you will decide to make in the classroom. And then there'll be some parents, I've had parents who said, Ms. Riggins, can they spend a little bit more time on this? I'm seeing this. And again, I've seen teachers make those calls and those judgments all the time based on real-time data that they have in the classroom. But again, I would say that would be a call that would be for the teachers and the assessments that they have for the student skills. I don't see why it should be excluded at all.
So you're giving schools autonomy if they need to pull in more kids to intervention. It's not just the one NWA data point from math.
Right.
Screener.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
Okay. And then the second question is as a parent of 3 kids, one in elementary, one in middle, and one in high school, all in APS for the last 10 and 11 years, my oldest. Right now, it's very challenging to know, even with the best teachers, what is actually happening and how your child is doing. Yes, I use Infinite Campus, but actually knowing where they need help, because so many of the tools are in the virtual platform and live in the virtual space. For an example, testing. From my understanding, much of the testing now, and this is finding out through my kids, not through the district, lives in the virtual space and is developed at the district level, and is also now mandated. The problem with that as a parent and as a child, and I think as a teacher, I'm hearing, is that the children do not know what they're getting wrong. And so what happens is then as a parent, you say, well, where's your test? Let me see what you got wrong on here. And then they're saying, I can't access my test. I have to go and meet with the teacher to access the test. And then that chews up a large portion of the classroom day and the teaching time and learning time for everybody, because the teachers have to access the tests and go over it with the child.
Okay.
So it is eating up a lot of the classroom time and the teacher's time. Myself, I am frustrated as a parent because, you know, days go by because teachers only have so much time during that period, depending on if it's 40 minutes or 60 minutes or 90 minutes.
Mhm.
And, you know, 3 days go by and you don't know what you got wrong, and you need to learn that skill to then keep building on it.
Mhm.
So am I understanding this correctly? Are now the ELA tests given all at middle school, high school, and elementary school? Are unit tests given on the computer and mandated by the district? And if so, can you talk a little bit more about that?
So I will do the best that I can for middle and high school, but I will tell you what we're trying to do in the elementary space, because again, in the elementary space, some things, especially for kinders, are not necessarily developmentally appropriate, right? So what we've decided to do is to try to look for gaps in learning for all students, but teachers have the ability to give the assessment in either paper or platform, and they can still print out the actual assessment itself when the kid is done. I think the idea around the collecting the assessments electronically was so that we could see what those trends are, because we're often confronted by in a classroom trends that could be a gap from the previous year with 5 or 6 kids. Sometimes the trend is across the grade level, and sometimes the trend is across the cluster. And the quickest way to assess that trend, either across the classroom or the school or the cluster, is to have electronic access to what students are doing. And even today, before I jumped on this call, I was presenting to some of our elementary principals from South Atlanta cluster, and we were able to see the student work like right there on the screen. I could literally see what the students were thinking because they wrote it out there. But to your point of that kid being able to have that feedback for themselves and for the kid to be able to bring that home, what I will try to do when we get off this call is talk to Aaliyah Henderson Rosser so I can get to the ETSs so that we can make sure that everybody understands how to make sure that their students have copies of their assessments, because that should not be the case. Just because it's in the platform doesn't mean that students should not be able to see and that parents should not be able to look at what their students are doing. Now for the middle school and the secondary, let me go back. That is for math. And we're trying to track the trends in math, because not only do we have a new curricular resource, we have the new standards to boot at the same time. So that's why it's important that we're tracking those trends in the data. On the ELA side, we've only offered that as an option. You don't have to do the assessments because we don't have a district curricular resource for ELA just yet. We have another year. The state standards for ELA will be adopted and implemented in the fall of 2025. And so that is where we'll start to try to get some of that trend data, from class to class. But we're at least a year and a half out from the ELA side. Now, on the secondary side, I do think you can see the data, but to your point, I will ask and make sure the secondary team gets back to Travis. And Travis, if you don't mind relaying, we'll get the answer for you on the secondary side as to how you can see those results from just a regular classroom assessment. If I'm hearing you
no,
correct.
it's not. It's ELA, math, and science I know of right now, and it seems like it's across 5th, 7th, and 8th grade.
Okay. I will ask.
I'm sorry, 5th, 7th, and 9th for all 3 of my kids. But again, it's all of these unit tests that live in this virtual space that I have not seen one unit test, and my children don't know what they got wrong.
Gotcha.
And they have to go to their teachers. And this is 3 different schools, all in the same cluster, but 3 different schools. and this is not just myself, I haven't looked at the chat, but hopefully other parents are sharing their
You're
experience.
probably
But
not alone. It's okay. No, you're not.
right. And I appreciate, I believe Dr. Battle's team is looking into this. And I hear what you're saying. I'm a researcher
Mhm,
as well.
mhm.
Data
But they
is
should have
important.
access- They should have
Data,
access to their
right. Data is important, but it does not help the child to learn from their mistakes or
Mhm.
the teachers with their time management of the classroom, just so that principals and district level staff can talk about data at
Oh,
a building someplace else.
No,
So that's,
friend.
I think the connection we're missing is, as parents, we're not able to help. As teachers, it's taking up a lot of classroom time.
Yeah.
So those are the components that I just wanted to
Yeah.
bring to your attention
I got
as
you.
a parent
I got you.
of 3 children. We need to have a balance
I'm
when we
agreeing
make
with
these
you.
decisions. Yeah,
I'm
and make
agree-
these
I'm-
decisions.
I am absolutely agreeing with you here, and that's what I'm saying. You should have access to your students' assessment as well, and that same assessment. If let's say that the teacher, because I was one who sent assessments home, they didn't have to stay there, but if I needed to refer to how a kid worked out that problem later without the assessment to drive instruction for small groups, there's data can be used at multiple levels, especially in the classroom. But I know you're absolutely right about being able to see the results of the assessment. And that is something that we can work on right away to determine why is it that you are not able to see and your child isn't able to see the results of their assessments. We can work on that right away.
Yep, and to help,
And maybe just some communication about all of these mandated unit assessments that are across multiple core subjects for all parents and caregivers across the district would help.
Okay.
Yeah. To follow up, this came up last night during the Family Engagement Learning Series on secondary math, and about the common unit assessments and having access. So I see Lisa, Board Member Jones. Hey, Board Member Jones, Board Member Howard, thank you all for joining us. Also have called this out, and so I see Matt Smith is on, and so I mentioned it already to him this morning, and Joe Austin. So we will make sure that we get kind of where everything is, what is expected, where the gaps are, and then Keisha from Family Engagement's on. Let's also think about how we can support families in how to access that and how to use it. And so we'll help Jamel on tying all of that together.
Yeah, we can get that for you though.
Cool. All right. So as we look for other questions, one thing I do want to call out with our time, a couple of things want to call out for our time remaining. One is the board is reviewing developing a literacy policy. And so I believe Board Member Mitchell and Board Member Jones are working on something. And Erica would be here. She's sick, so hopefully she's feeling better. But just wanted either in this venue or separately through emails to your board members and let's talk to your board members. Think about what you would want as whether you're an employee on here or whether you're and Board Member Jones, feel free to add on to it, or if you're a family community. What are some areas that you would hope would be covered in a literacy policy? What would you think would be important to put in writing at the board level and the policy level to help support our focus on literacy? Both our literacy is our goal number one, also literacy focus, as Dr. Battle mentioned, kind of walking in. And so I'll pass it over to Board Member Jones if you want to add anything, if I missed something, and then over to Lisa with our hand raise.
Sure. I think this is an unusual way for us to approach a policy development, but it's important because if we're going to become a city of readers, it's going to take all of us supporting it, and to get all of that buy-in, we're going to need all the input from parents, from teachers, from the community about what sort of policy guardrails we need to put in place to enable the fullest kind of teaching of our kids how to read. And so this is a conversation starter Erica and I have been working with the speech school and some other folks, looking at different policies at both the state level and local levels to see how we can shape that so that we can get things moving. And so I'm just really interested in hearing from the community about your thoughts and what you'd like to see.
Awesome. Thank you. Lisa.
So I'll admit before I say this, I'm not well versed on all the words that are in the current goals and guardrails. But whenever I hear a lot about the literacy policies and, especially in the board candidate forums, to me, it feels like there's a lot of focus on the science of reading and young readers. So I'd like a policy that includes, what about these kids who are in 5th and 6th grade who are still struggling to read or older? I used to help out in an after school program, and there were plenty of 5th graders who were struggling to read grade level books. And so it's just, a calling out of that this isn't just a little kid issue is something that I'd like to see.
Awesome. Great feedback. Thanks, Lisa. Denisha.
Hi, everyone. So this was addressed at the board meeting, but just to reiterate, would love to see some type of something in the policy of surrounding like teacher professional development. A lot of times we assume that just because I was an educator for 11 years, and so you just assume that teachers can pick it up. But if we're going to opt into something that's different from the way teachers learn how to read or how they were trained, I think it's super important to have a very specific training process for them. And I know you guys talked about how you might incentivize like reading certifications and things like that. So I think that would be awesome to see.
Awesome. Thank you. Dion.
I know policies have different things that we can and cannot put in them, and then regulations live underneath them. I think first I would just like to say, I hope that the timeline on this and rolling it out is not delayed, and it is done in a timely manner. I think it's long overdue. That would be one. But two, I hope somewhere, if it lives in policy or if it lives in regulation, we truly stipend teachers for these extra credentialing or training that they do. And because many of these hours are going to have to live outside of school hours. And I hope that stipending looks different than the certification bonuses that have been referenced whenever any of teachers or parents or caregivers bring up, please stipend for this. I'd also like to see some sort of warehouse established where it has each staff member's name and what level of training that they have finished. Many times in the audits and when reports are given, historical data seems to not be there because someone has left or it lived on someone's computer who's left. So some sort of central warehouse that is accessible and stores this information and starts being stored as soon as possible.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. So as you start thinking, I'm sure, like for me, I do better reacting versus starting from a blank sheet, but I think this is some great feedback starting from a blank sheet of paper. And as Board Member Jones and the rest start drafting, I'm sure we'll be coming right back out to get feedback on specifics. Dion, did you have something else?
I did. I just, we're going with right now, you guys mentioned Amplify earlier for middle school for ELA and math. And I think we've learned a lot as parents, district staff, students, and teachers, and we've kind of pivoted on some things with that. So maybe even, again, I don't know if this lives in the policy or a regulation, there is like we reassess, not the children, but reassess the program. So there is a summary, like you guys are doing a yearly facility master plan now report out every January, February. Maybe there's like a What have we learned in the first year? What have we learned in the second year? How have we pivoted? What changes have we made? Stuff like that, where you, again, you have this historical kind of content to see what has happened and where we're growing.
Yep, absolutely. Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing. If you, as you come up with some new things, oh, I did see Denisha. I don't know if there's a timeline for vote. Board Member Jones, do you have a timeline at least for development?
Yeah, we're doing the development at the moment. Trying to put we actually have one. So we'll be trying to put that out for commentary at the next committee meeting. So the policy committee meetings, we'll make that available so people can comment on it and take a look at it. And really what we're hoping for is a first read in November. As far as, how long from first read to final adoption, it can vary. We want to make sure we have broad buy-in, on this, but, if everybody's good to go, I mean, we have, waived first read and gone right into adoption for some other things. So we'll just see how it goes.
Awesome. There's also an opportunity to build in some of the things that were mentioned, that whether it fits into policy or not, be on the lookout for budget retreats and budget commission meetings to kind of really identify, you put your money towards your priorities, right? And so where are we prioritizing our dollars in the budget process going forward? Let's see, Lauren?
Yes, I asked it in the chat, but I wasn't sure if I didn't want it to go amiss. But I know on Monday, Tamara, you mentioned that there was going to be community engagement rolling out. Do we know what the plan is for that community engagement is, or when the public is going to hear more about that plan?
Yeah, we're gonna, as a policy committee, talk about what we put out ahead of the policy committee meeting, which is later this month. I am trying to nail down a date for the panel discussion that I mentioned, and that's going to be at the end of this month. And so hopefully I will have a date to circulate to everybody as soon as I can get my subject matter experts committed to a certain date. And so that detail will be coming out. So that will be an open panel discussion that we hopefully get a lot of people to attend. And then there will be at the November board meeting, assuming that we can get that covered too. Board chair Collins has asked for a presentation from the speech school to the board. And we're going to try to make sure we get that settled. So we don't have the dates specifically yet, but we will.
Awesome. Thank you. Akeem, and then Dion, and then we'll wrap up with some sharing some information. Akeem?
Hey, how are y'all doing today? I just wanted to throw in like with literacy policy to see like some type of policy where or some type of support or measurement where it goes and tracks the students, like say for instance, if they're in kindergarten to third grade and we see deficiencies in that early stages, it continues to have monitoring throughout their tenure as a student, so that we're going back and checking it and saying, okay, well, this is their individualized plan, and this is our over given outcome for a given period of time. Sometimes I would say like some screeners would be suggested as well, like dyslexia screenings. I know some people may not like that route, but sometimes if you know early enough, you can change the outcome before that child is for a long way in their way. That's the only thing I would like to throw in.
Great. Thanks, Kim. And Dion?
Yeah, just to be clear, I saw Katie's note in the chat. I'm not talking about a progress monitoring student governance report. What I'm talking about is like actual practical, like lessons learned, how we're pivoting, just so parents that are new to the system can see those changes, how we've updated it, that kind of historical data, information, although I do love data, but just what have we changed and learned from it. There was one other thing I was going to ask you about. I'm sorry, I just forgot. Oh, and then just like these are living in two different spaces, right? Because I know we are talking about potentially engagement regarding updating potential goals and guardrails. And I know those change in 25, 26, but the literacy policy and these kind of things, although they are connected, they are separate, correct? We don't have to wait on the engagement to change the goals and guardrails or discuss changing the goals and guardrails to launch this literacy policy, do we? Or a literacy program?
No, there's I don't think there's a dependencies on one versus the other, but there should be alignment across all of them. And so,
correct. I agree. Okay, I agree with that. I just wanted to make sure the timeline wasn't going to get drawn out.
Seems like Member Jones is on it. Got working on panels this month and first read in less than a month. So seems like we're moving forward. Okay, I do want to share before we jump off. I want to share a couple things that may be helpful for both for you on the call, but also as you share with other families and communities out there. So one is the board did approve the monitoring calendar for the next 2 years. So you can follow along. Hopefully you can see my screen. You can follow along both what will be at the board meetings as well as the Thursday after meetings. So right now we talk numeracy literacy, and then I've already moved on to next month. Next month will be numeracy. Then we'll have December with Profile of a Graduate, January with our guardrail on innovation and accountability, and you see it kind of keeps moving forward. And so they have the next 2 years mapped out on progress monitoring. The other thing I want to share with you all is just like this, our APS Connects website is an opportunity for us to kind of hold everything in one place, but I just wanted to share some stuff from what we've heard from you all in the past. One is what you can attend all of the different meetings and engagements that are out there. So what we've tried to do is create these engagement recaps on everything that happened the month previously. So whether it was a district board meeting, whether it was a listening session, whether it was a community advisory meeting. So I posted September's today, and it calls out some of the high level themes from the safety town halls or from board member District 2 and 6 community meetings and other things that happen. We'll do this each month to at least capture at a high level what we're hearing from the community, particularly if you weren't able to attend. This also holds all of the recordings and presentations and stuff from district level. You should also be seeing both retweeted from APS in our newsletter and from APS Strategy is a weekly heads up on engagement that's about to happen to kind of help you with your calendar. But if you aren't on social media, the district calendar is on the main website, and we've done, I'm going to try to pat all of us on the back, we've done a pretty good job with maintaining it. You can see, for example, today, the goal and guardrail conversation, South Atlantic Cluster Advisories tonight. There's a virtual community meeting on the Student Bill of Rights on Saturday. We have fall break next week, and then you can see going forward, Feral Cluster, more Student Bill of Rights. There's a parent, Spanish-speaking parent meeting with Dr. Battle on the 18th. We've got a lot of special education stuff happening on the week of the 24th. So please, when in doubt, go to the district calendar, and a lot of the flyers and links will all be there to house, and then I try to recap it at the end of each month. So hopefully that at least helps. If you have ideas on strengthening that type of feedback loop, please let us know so we can kind of get it tighter. So with that, let me just glance through the chat to make sure. Oh yeah, sorry, Katie. Oh, and I didn't refresh my screen. I did put your meeting. So on, sorry, Board Member Howard's meeting is on Friday, tomorrow at 9 a.m. I will try to put, if you have it open, then put the chat, the registration link. If not, let me try to pull up my calendar and put it on before people have to jump off.
I just placed it in the chat for you.
Thank you. So please join us tomorrow for Board Member Howard's meeting, and we'll be capturing themes and trying to answer questions. Anything else for the good of the order, or no? I do not I'm going to have to lean on Board Member Jones or Howard. If y'all could get with Pierre or Keith, I don't know the maps for the election. So if y'all have access to them, maybe we can send it out as a follow-up with this, or at least maybe tomorrow at tomorrow's meeting. So I'll try to pull it and send it out as well. Board Member Howard showed where it was, so I'll try to seek that out as well. And so with that, I appreciate everyone's time and attention on literacy today, and we'll see you at any number of things between now and next month. But if not, we'll see you for numeracy in November. All right, y'all have a great one.